Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Lawrence Dunning. Lawrence, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Heather.
I am excited to share your journey. Please give listeners a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
So I live just south of Chicago, Northwest Indiana, and I'm a father and husband. I work in real estate as a broker and an investor, developer, and teach jujitsu. And I just try and make the most out of this wonderful human experience that we have.
Okay, so here's why I wanted to have you on. That's where you're currently at. That's your current life chapter. But you were very successful young in your 20s, right?
Yes.
So maybe we could take it back a little bit because I like this idea of reinventing yourself and having an athletic background, the mindset. You had something about having a bulletproof mindset. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background, maybe even in your 20s, and how you've consistently reinvented yourself, how you keep going to get to where you're at.
Heather, it's so funny looking back. So when I was young, early 20s, I graduated and I got my degree and then I got an MBA in finance. And then I had this opportunity. I was actually looking forward to traveling the world because I figured I'm going to work hard. I'm a hard worker. So before I start my career, I'll have a few years. I'll hang out, maybe go to Australia or New Zealand, hang out on the beach, just have a good time. And then I got this job opportunity at a trading company. And I was like, well, maybe I can delay my travels for a bit and I can just get a bit of money so I can enjoy my travels a bit more. And I went to this interview and I see these young guys, mid-20s making hundreds of thousands of pounds. It was in London a year. And it didn't seem that difficult. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I can do this for a little bit longer than I thought, and I'll set myself up for life. So I joined this trading company. They ended up sending me to first Amsterdam, and then I was on Wall Street in New York, and then they sent me to Chicago, where I was a pit trader. And I made them a lot of money, but I just got a fraction of it because that's the way companies work with bureaucracy. So I saw this opportunity. So I left. One of the older traders was my kind of my mentor and a friend. And so he and I left and we started our own group. And then he had a bit of a breakdown, and then he and I split up, and then I just had my own group. And I did very, very well financially. And I got to about 30 years old, and I thought, wow, I've got a lifetime to make money. But I was an amateur boxer. I won the Chicago Golden Gloves. I was doing jiu-jitsu, and I had this passion to be a professional fighter because I thought it would be so hard. I'm not a natural athlete. I thought it would be so hard. And I've got a very small window of opportunity. And if I do this now, I'll never regret it. I can always make money. You can always work when you're in your 60s and 70s. But if it's a professional sports, you have to do it when you're young. So it wasn't even a hard looking back. I'm proud of myself at the courage, but it wasn't even a hard decision to make. I was so passionate about wanting to pursue that goal. So I basically gave my company away to one of the employees, and I spent 5 years, and I pursued all my dreams, and I had this wonderful time, traveled the world, spent all my money, made every foolish decision you can make with your finances. And then I got to 35 and I realized that also I was kind of unlucky. I went through the 2009 financial crisis. So I was unlucky too. I made some mistakes, but I also had some bad luck. And then I realized that, man, I was used to a certain standard of living with all that money. And then I was in my mid 30s and I was kind of finished with my sabbatical of my fun. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, it's time to get serious. But the trading floor at the time, the whole business model I used to have, it all become high frequency trading. So I was like, man, what am I going to do? I had what I would call an early midlife crisis. I'm 35 years old. I broke up with a long-term girlfriend. I retired from fighting, which was my passion since I was a teenager. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And luckily, I just had a really good friend that lived in my same building, and we both had dogs, and we used to walk the dogs and chat. And he was an attorney, and he said, I hate being an attorney. I want to start a real estate company, and you'd kill it in real estate. You're in Chicago, you have an English accent. I think you'd do really well. And when it comes to, salesmanship and kind of putting yourself out there, I was actually very shy about doing that. So it took a bit of work and a bit of overcoming resistance, but I ended up getting my real estate license, started working at this company, and looking back now, it was the best thing because, like you said, that idea of reinvention at the time it sucks because if you end one career where you kind of reach a very high level and then you have to restart a second career, but by definition, you're kind of restarting at the bottom. Now, of
Yeah.
course, your path up the mountaintop is going to be quicker because you have a lot of transferable skills. But the initial year or two, it was pretty depressing. I'm not going to lie. But I grew so much as a person that
Yeah.
now when I look back at my life, I'm so grateful. So I had my finance career, I had my professional athletic career, and now I'm in my third career of real estate and development. And I guess I'm a new dad. I've got a 3-year-old, so that's a whole nother journey which I'm starting. And I realize now that if you have these reinventions, it's so good for you as a human, just as the idea of just reinvention and growth, because it's too easy. It doesn't matter how open-minded you think you are. As you go through life, it's just so easy to get stuck in patterns and become more close-minded. So I always joke, I always used to joke, man, I wish I love the idea of Bitcoin and decentralized currency. And I wish I just bought a few and it was at $10, I'd be a multimillionaire, a crypto millionaire. But then if I had had the foresight to do that, I would have missed out on all the lessons and the self-growth since then. So I'm actually it's a wonderful feeling. It's not I would have done so many things differently if I lived my life again, but I'm also so happy where I'm at. I'm so grateful for all the mistakes I made.
Okay, so I want to break some of this down, because whether we're talking about reinventing yourself, I think another way to explain it is an identity shift. And
Yes.
so I think it was at 30 years old when you sold the company and took your quote 5 year sabbatical. But even that, you left the trading world, identity shifted into jujitsu. So full time, and there's so many, I think, metaphors and parallels we can share with training and sports into everyday life, right? Building that mindset,
Yes.
perseverance, resilience. Because what I find is that a lot of people resist change, but the truth is change is the only constant. So what can we share to individuals as an example? A lot of people that I talk to, I share with you, one of my biggest platforms is LinkedIn. So I get a lot of very financially successful 40, 50-year-olds miserable in their life, their relationship. So they chased money, found out money isn't happiness. And so it is but their identity is tied to the money or the success, but they're unhappy. Or there's bankruptcy or there's divorce. Or, I talked to a gentleman right now. That's where he's at. Divorce, unemployed. Like you get a fresh start. If it's your rock bottom, the only place is up. So I'd
That's
love
so
for you
true.
to can we share some metaphors and parallels? Because I speak a lot in endurance speak and athletic background into everyday life. Like you have to keep going. I also call entrepreneurship personal development on steroids, but I want to pick your brain. I want to learn from you. How do you keep going? Is it environment? Is it clarity? Is it like, how do you continue to do this and quote, be successful?
Well, the example you gave is very interesting, and now I'm in my 40s. I'm seeing that a lot too, where people at the expense of pretty much everything else that I would call important in life, chase the money. And then once they achieved that career success that brought them the money, they ended up, like you said, maybe their relationships didn't work out. They didn't have other hobbies or things they were passionate about. Maybe they let their health go by the wayside. And then they come to a kind of, I guess that's one of the causes of the midlife crisis, or just a period of deep unhappiness, when it's almost like you spent years climbing the wrong mountain, and then when you realize you have that feeling of loss. In terms of motivation and drive and discipline, I think to an extent, I got asked this recently. Someone said, like, you're such an overachiever, and where did that come from? And I think obviously it's a mixture of inbuilt genes and environments. And I think that I was lucky as a kid to have good role models that I looked at. I had a very successful uncle who was an entrepreneur, very famous photographer in England. And I would see he lived this wonderful. He was a very hard worker, but he also took wonderful vacations, and he had a very rich social network, and he traveled the world, and he did all these wonderful things. So I had a very he was also my godfather. I was very close to him, so he was a really really good role model. But I think I also somehow realized at a very young age that there's no price that's worth giving up your health for, because at the end of the day, all we have is our health. And my dad's in his 70s, and every summer he goes and spends 3 months hiking across the Alps or the Pyrenees Mountains. Like, he's incredibly active and healthy. And so having him as a father, that's what I thought was normal. Is just always exercising and doing things physically, working out, climbing mountains, doing those kind of things. So I guess I was very lucky in that sense. But also we have a choice of the inputs we put in our body. So I've been a big reader since I was a kid. And when you read about great people, number one, you can find inspiration, but you can also learn about the mistakes that they made, and it helps you to maybe not spend all the time climbing the wrong mountaintops. I think the
Yeah.
example you gave was so important, and I think it's so relevant to so many people. Is I see it a lot in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a wonderful community, and initially when I started, I was boxing and I wanted to do MMA, which is mixed martial arts, and in order if you're just a boxer, you're going to get submitted by someone who does jiu-jitsu. So I started getting ready to do jiu-jitsu. So for me, jiu-jitsu was a combat sport. I was using it to compete. And then I retired from professional fighting, but I was still competing jiu-jitsu and I still teach to this day. And so for me, jiu-jitsu was still a sport. It was still a competitive outlet. And then now I realize now I'm in my 40s and I kind of temporarily retired last year. I'm not sure if I come back to it, but I'm not competing in jiu-jitsu anymore. But every time I go there, I don't just get a 90-minute break from my life and from the stresses of every day. I get the sense of community. And I see these people on the mats. Some of them are late 40s, mid 50s. They're professionals, they're attorneys, they're doctors, they're entrepreneurs, they're successful people, but they're still doing something several times a week that's really hard. And it gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of enjoyment. And it gives them, it's a clarified goal. They're striving for the next belt, or maybe they want to do a competition next year, or maybe they want to lose 10 pounds. And I just think it doesn't have to be jujitsu, but I think it's so important for everyone to find some passion that's outside of their relationship, it's outside of their career. Like you're a coach, but you have your podcast, which also helps grow your business, but it's a creative outlet. It's something that you can do. You can talk to people, you can get inspired. I think it's so wonderful. We live in a world now where technology, yes, it does have a lot of negatives, but it enables you to connect. You and I are in different states, but we're connecting right now. And I think that's so important, is for someone to find, they might not know initially, but maybe if they take a few classes and they try different things, is find something else that you're passionate about. It's so tough because I come from Europe, and in America we really do chase money. And when I was young, I chased money as well, but I always saw money as freedom. I saw money as buying back my time to enable me to do things that I was really passionate about. And a lot of people, they use their money to just keep increasing their standard of wealth. So then they have to keep being tied to certain careers that they maybe don't like. And it's just this never-ending treadmill. And I think that's the danger, is people, a lot of time I'm seeing that now because I'm at that age where a lot of people are realizing it, but it's not too late, because it's never too late, but it's later than they probably would have liked.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few things I want to touch on and take a couple steps back. Number one, I want to talk about the importance of environment, because I think a lot of people, the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, depending on your environment, you either mimic exactly what you learned, and that's just your trajectory, or some people from lack, scarcity, pain, whatever, do a 180 and go the complete different direction. So as an example, you had these mentors and people thinking big and doing these amazing things. I, on the other hand, I come from very supportive parents, that very old school thinking. So my dad worked one job until he retired with a pension. That's not in today's world. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I have a brother. So I don't want to use the term black sheep, but I don't really relate or connect with most of my family, even extended family. I'm an entrepreneur. I love travel. I do endurance sports. Like, I'm always pushing, growing, evolving, challenging myself, and they don't really relate or understand. Supportive, especially my parents, supportive, but they can't help me in my journey because they haven't been there, done that. And that's why I seek like-minded communities and coaches and masterminds, because it wasn't in my environment, but I wanted to create that. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
So people in that position, what can you offer to them that, like, maybe you don't have a blueprint or examples, but how could they get started to push and challenge themselves or put themselves in that right environment?
Well, hopefully anyone listening to this listens to podcasts, so they understand that the power of podcasting. And there's a podcast that I really like. It's called The All In. Um, and it's with four friends, and I think they're all either multimillionaires. I know a few of them are billionaires. So it is kind of entrepreneurial. That most of them are in tech. So it's in that entrepreneurial tech world. But just listening to them talk, and they argue back and forth about different things, like politically and what's going on in the world, and maybe what are the opportunities in business. And it's just, you're listening to people that are just uber successful debating things. And that's just one example. But there's so much, Tim Ferriss has incredible, and Joe Rogan, they have these incredible um, entrepreneurs, authors, public intellectuals, interesting people. There's so many interesting people that if you want to listen to podcasts, you can listen to. And I think so. So the information is out there, and it's so hard right now because we're all distracted so much by technology and phones.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is take time away from your phone. And listen, it's a struggle for me as much as anyone because I work in real estate. The definition of my business is you get an unbelievable amount of incoming messages, whether it's calls, texts, emails. So it's something, put your phone in the other room and just spend time like reading a deep book. Try and get back to deep thinking. And then there's all this information out there to get inspired to get inspired from. But then you need to spend time with yourself and really ask yourself those questions. Because if there's one thing I've learned, Heather, it's our subconscious is something that we really have to learn to listen to. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made in business is I partnered with a developer who ended up screwing me over. And it was a very financially costly lesson. And it was very emotional. I ended up having contentious lawsuits and it was an absolute nightmare. And I remember the whole relationship with him. Like he came to my wedding and on paper, everything looked good. But I always had this feeling something was off in my gut. And I always used to override it with my intellect. Like, no,
Mm.
it's just this weird feeling that I couldn't explain. And now looking back at the whole situation, I should have listened to my gut all along. And I think so a lot of people, if they can learn to listen to their gut, so you have to there's all this information out there, whether it's books, podcasts, the information is the inspiration is out there, the stories, the knowledge, the wisdom, it's all out there. So I
Yeah.
think you have to really have the discipline to put the time in to get a lot of that. But then you have to really let it sit with you and think about, what is important in your life? Is it taking this next promotional work that's going to be really good financially and it's going to look good to your friends because you're getting promotions and you're going traveling? But maybe that's taking you away from your two young children. And you don't want to realize when they're going to college that that was a terrible mistake. You'll never get those years back. But maybe, so that's a very simple example. But you're trying to figure out in your life, we only have one life. And you want to realize as soon as possible that there's nothing free in this life. Life is about trade-offs. That's one of Thomas Sowell's big revelations. And one of the reasons I hate politics is politicians try to argue free things as if there's solutions. And unfortunately, in life, I wish there were solutions. There's never a solution. Everything in life is trade-offs. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So I think having an upbringing where you're around inspirational people and you have this cushy upbringing, yes, it is definitely easier for some than for others. But inspiration is out there. I just think that there's, I'm wearing a David Goggins t-shirt and he's written two books, which I find so inspirational. He came from absolutely nothing and now he's this very successful self-made author and public figure. But yet he chooses to go to Canada and be a smoke jumper and put out fires because he's realized that life is not sitting in silk sheets and sleeping in and enjoying the fruits of his labor. He realizes, and I think I have the same philosophy as him, is a rich life is about one where you're fulfilling your potential by overcoming struggles and by achieving things that you want to achieve and by planning your life well. It's not necessarily what a lot of people that I think when you mention those people that are in their 50s and they're going through a divorce because they were in an unhappy relationship and maybe they don't have that much career satisfaction after spending 2 decades of their life in a certain career. I think we have to a lot of people stick in bad careers because I think if I can just stick this out, I'm going to make X amount of money and then I'm going to retire with my gold watch on a beach and that's going to be happiness. And I don't think there's happiness. I really like what you said about embracing uncertainty. If we realize that life is uncertain and we're never going to get there, we're never going to arrive. So that makes us then we have to reframe it and we have to think, okay, in that case, if we're never going to arrive, we have to embrace the chaos and we have to enjoy the journey because that's a realization that it took me 44 years to come to, but I just came to it this summer. Last summer, I was at a bachelor party in Mexico and I was thinking, man, I always used to think if I achieve X goal or X career trajectory that I'm chasing or whatever it is, I'm going to be happy. And I realized that it's just too late. You can't think like that, otherwise your life's going to go by. And I'm gonna have the confidence that I'm gonna try my best to get to where I want to be in life, but I'm gonna really try to enjoy every day because I don't want to waste this human experience that we have.
Well, and I love that message. Something you were just talking about is what I call conditional living. And I found myself in that trap. I'll be happy when I make more money, get in a relationship, climb the corporate ladder, get a bigger house, go on more vacations. I even remember being on so not present in life. I was on vacation thinking about where I'd go next. That's how not present in life I was. And on this idea of conditional living, I hear it from people. I literally had a conversation with a guy on LinkedIn yesterday who's in that same shit, different day monotony cycle. And he's like, man, if I could just get through another 10 years. And I'm like, first of all, 10 years isn't guaranteed. You could die tomorrow, and that's how you
Mm,
want to go out. So
mm,
I guess maybe I do have a different perspective and mindset, but I just like, I will not settle for the status quo. I have this internal burning desire, and maybe that's a Napoleon Hill thing, but I just have this burning desire to like reach my highest potential, live my best life,
yes.
experience all of it. So here's what I want to ask you. What is a bulletproof mindset? What does that mean?
Well, I think we have to control the mind. So if you want to let your mind wander, it can kind of spiral down and go to negative places.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be disciplined with our thoughts, just like we're disciplined with our, with our actions. So it's if there's certain things that I just tell myself, and I would call them a non-negotiable. So if I say today, I'm going to go for a run today, and for whatever reason, I'm like everyone else, my day gets away from me and it's late at night. Sometimes I have to go for a run at 11 o'clock at night. Do I want to? No. But I want to be the type of person that knows that my word means something. And it's not, I like to think my word means something to other people, but the most important thing is it means something to yourself. Because then you can become that type of person where when you say something, you're going to do it. And I remember having a conversation with a really good friend of mine, and I thought he was going to say, "Are you crazy that there's way too many obstacles for you to do that?" And he turns around to me and he says, "You know what? You're going to figure it out and you're going to do it." I said, "Why do you say that?" And he said, "Because that's the type of person you are." And I've known him 20 years. And that was such a beautiful compliment. And it was music to my ears. And I thought, man, he almost inspired me because I was still had doubts about I can't even remember what it was, but trying to figure out how I was going to get there. And so that's what we want to create. And the beautiful thing that I want to share with you is if you had asked any of my high school friends, do you think I would be a multimillionaire before I was 30? Do you think I'd be a professional fighter? Do you think I'd move to America and have several different careers of success? I guarantee you almost all of them would have said no. I was a very introverted, shy kid. I wasn't particularly self-confident. I was very shy around women up until I was probably in my early 20s. I didn't have too much strength of character. But what I did do is I worked on myself, and it was like a slow and steady progression. And I just kept building and I kept building and I kept building. And I really love, I know Tony Robbins said it. I don't know if he's quoting somebody else, but there's the idea of we always overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years when it's 1 year stacked on a second year, stacked on a third year of constant progression. And I always had that mindset where I'm just going to keep working on myself. I'm going to keep working to create that bulletproof mindset. I'm going to keep working to create discipline with myself where I'm just going to keep building on things and keep putting positive things in my brain, positive things in my body. I'm going to keep accomplishing things, and I'm going to keep dreaming bigger because you can't just um, a lot of entrepreneurs have said this. If I they say if I knew how hard it would have been the last 10 years to build my company, I would never have even started. But I was so ignorant, I didn't even realize. And then over the years of them building and struggling and failing and learning and then growing and progressing, they're 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 improving the whole time as their company or their business is growing too. So I think too many people at step A and they're looking at step Z, and there's so many different steps along the way, and they think, I can't imagine how I'm going to get there. But just focus on what's in front of you, focus on the little wins you can do, the little things you can do. And over time, you'll be really surprised how far you can go in a long term horizon.
100%. So I have a question for you because I feel like We definitely think a lot alike. And I remember when I was training for a marathon. So for me, I love running, but I love running like a couple miles. I love that runner's high, and I wanted to push myself. So I signed up for and ran a marathon, which is not exactly easy. And I remember it was 5 months training, 20 weeks. I found a training plan. And for me, it was literally how do you run a marathon? One step at a time, a quarter mile at a time, a mile. And how I did it, I played a game and I would just catch my eye on somebody in front of me and pass them. And then it was just like I continued passing one person at a time. That's how I kept my focus. And what I loved about marathon training, obviously, like I completed it awesome. It was faster than I planned, but it was like who I became in even 20 weeks. That mindset shift, that follow through, that grit, that perseverance in 20 weeks. Because, wherever anybody's at in your life right now, even if 6 months seems like really far out, the time's going to pass anyway. So get started, right?
I I love that, and I was actually a runner when I was a kid, and I've run a marathon on every continent. It was a big goal of mine. I ran in Antarctica last year, and running is hard. Like I'll go for a 5 mile run, and I'll think, man, how am I running marathons? Like, right, it's hard. It's not easy. So kudos to you. What you said is you just have to you get your plan, and then you go step by step, and then by 6 months, you're like, man, I just ran a marathon in a faster time than I thought. That's a great analogy for life, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
have your plan, and you're not the same person you're going to be in 6 months. You're going to grow and develop and learn and improve so much over time because every day you're doing the right things. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of life does come down to I love James Clear's book Atomic Habits because I think goals are great to set intentions, but it's the daily habits that move you where it's almost imperceptible to you because you're just doing them every day and you build it in the fabric of your day and your routine. And but then it just becomes a part of you. So
Yeah.
one weird unexpected thing is I got a cold plunge. We moved to Northwest Indiana. I went from a high rise to a house. So I have a basement. I built out a basement gym and I got a cold plunge. And I did it because I'm hearing all these things from people about how cold therapy is really good for your body. What I didn't realize is the 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 good that it did for my mind.
Yeah.
So I hate the cold and I hate the mornings. So I normally don't do it first thing. I do a few work emails and then I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna do my 3 minutes at 42 degrees. It's miserable. And it's the amount of hormone, the amount of endorphins it releases when I get out. I'm happy for hours. It's wild. But it's just this little thing where it's something that I really don't want to do every day. And it's 3 minutes, but you do it and it's like that's a little win. And then you just keep stacking these little wins on every day. And then you go to sleep, and I don't have not every day that I have is perfect. And there's some days I go to bed, I'm a little frustrated because I feel like I wasted the day. But in general, almost every night when I go to bed, I'm very happy. I feel like I've had a day that I've wanted to I've lived it in the way that I want to live it. And then because when all said and done, Heather, I want when we come to the end of our life, the best thing we can say is I lived as many wonderful moments in as many wonderful days as I can. And it kind of comes back to that mindset of you and I, we were both chasing something, and then we said, okay, when we get this, we'll be happy. But if we can just be happy along the journey, I think that's the best way to live life. And listen, I don't have the answers. I've been thinking about these kind of things for years, like how to best craft your life for happiness. And so much of it is a lot of things with fighting is if I had 6 weeks to a professional fight, I was those last 6 weeks were just it was just a grind. I'm training multiple times a day. I have to be cutting weight, so my diet's on point. I'm resting. I'm not allowed too much fun because I don't want to have alcohol. I don't want to be out late because I'm training the next day. A lot of the time, I used to think, man, I wish I could just click my fingers and just be done with these 6 weeks. Fight's over, and I can just go back to normal life. I can relax. I used to think that all the time, and now when I look back at that period, it was one of my most I have the most beautiful memories of that period of my life. But at the time, I didn't really enjoy it too much because it wasn't the action I was doing. I didn't have the right mindset. Whereas if I had been a bit more of the mindset today, it was like, man, this is such a special time in my life. I'm going to enjoy it while I'm doing it, not after looking back. And there's a lovely scene at the end of the show The Office. I think the last episode where one of the characters says, I wish there was a way that you knew at the time when it was the good old days. Because too many times we only realize in hindsight, we kind of look back and we're like, man, they were the good old days. That was the real richness in my life. And so that's my future goal is to try and enjoy the good old days while you're having them. Because I think there's no question, whatever great things you and I achieve in the next, 20 years, I promise you, if we're talking to our future self in 20 years, they'd say, man, if I could go back to 2024, I will be so happy with, the opportunities I had and the youth and the energy and the potential and all the things coming. So that's my goal, is to try and enjoy the good old times today and not look back and be like, wow, I wish I'd enjoyed it a bit more in the past.
I feel like I'm a walking quote book, so I have to share two with you. I have a plaque in my bathroom from my mom that says, "Enjoy the minute while you're in it."
I love that.
And the second one that came when you were talking about the journey and whatever, Abraham Hicks, I love Abe. I've followed Abe for years, but Abe says you cannot have a happy ending to an unhappy journey. So
I
get
love
to
that.
tie those together. If you're not happy now, you're not going to be happy later.
Hmm. And that idea, Heather, the idea of happiness, I think it's really easy for people to get caught up in their problems. And listen, they're real. I don't want to minimize it, because they are problems. Everyone, and it doesn't matter, anyone that you and I maybe admire or look up to, they also have problems. Everyone has problems.
Yeah.
But there is, people listening to this that live in the West, we do have general first world problems. And I think one of the reasons, my favorite thing about traveling is when you see how hard millions of people, billions of people around the world have it, how lucky we are in the West. There's this awful political climate now where there's a lot of kind of hatred towards America. And as an immigrant here, the opportunities that I see here, just they're so rich compared to people that are just struggling. So there's billions of people around the world that live on less than $1 a day. They don't have access to clean water. They're starving. They don't have access to food. They don't have access to basic healthcare. We are so lucky now. I think so many of our problems are, that is, life has become so easy that we're having kind of existential problems where, we don't really see happiness because all our basic needs are met. And so I think that's just such a good reminder. The shifting perspectives is, read about these great historic figures and some of the things they had to overcome. Long Walk to Freedom, about Nelson Mandela, locked up for over 20 years. And when he came out, he didn't have hatred in his heart. He had compassion and love and forgiveness. And he went on to achieve great things and cement his legacy. Or go to a place like Cambodia, where they have the largest percentage of orphans around the world, and spend time with these kids. I remember going there years ago, and I was at one of the monuments, and there were all these little young orphans just trying to sell things to survive. And I ended up going. One of them was like, "Oh, I'll make you some coffee for whatever it was, 20 cents or something. Come back to our place." So I went back there and I was hanging out with this family there, and they had all these dogs running around. And you see these people just live with absolutely nothing, but the kids are smiling and the kids are happy because they're outside in nature and they have community. And I would look at them and say, man, these poor orphans, they have no money. They 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 live, they don't have a family. They don't have what I would say many reasons to be happy, but they are so happy. And then you look at Western kids that probably have, everything that they would dream of, and they're unhappy and they spend all day staring at screens. So I think just shifting our perspective a little bit and trying to focus on what we do have is going to help you have a bit more of that gratitude mindset that you're talking about, where we can enjoy the journey. And that's, we mentioned a bit before we started recording about stoicism. I love the idea of stoicism because I think it's one of the most practical philosophies for happiness. And Marcus Aurelius would write in his journal, I know today I'm going to deal with all these, people that are trying to lie to me, deceive me, cheat me, all these terrible things. But I know that, so I'm still going to get up and I'm going to be happy and I'm going to do my best with what I have. And I think that's such a wonderful philosophy that
Yeah.
none of us have the same opportunities. None of us have the same mental gifts, some physical gifts, spiritual gifts. We all have different things that we can work with. But within that parameter, we can still work with it. So I think just having that mindset of gratitude, if anyone listening to this or that's thinking about things they can do in their life, they have opportunity of time. Warren Buffett is in his 90s. He has billions of dollars, but he has very little time. Every day could be his last. He's at the end of his life. So I
Yeah.
think having the idea of just the gratitude of time, and then how are we going to craft that and use it the best we can.
I love that. Here's what I want to ask you, because we've kind of touched on it throughout the podcast, and I think you're an example of it, but I am extremely passionate about, and I'm always shouting from the rooftops the idea of being a conscious creator of our reality. And what I mean by that is living intentionally. You very intentionally have these daily practices and you're listening to podcasts and putting yourself in these right environments. So I just want to ask you, what are some of your daily rituals or practices? Because you're human. I mean, I'm human. I have off days or bad days or, negative mindset, but I'm able to get back on track. So what are you doing to keep you forward focused, growing, evolving?
Well, I think this comes from my athletic background, but I have a pretty structured week, but it's not so structured that there's no time for flexibility. So, for instance, we're talking on a Tuesday. Tuesday, I try and leave for podcasting and less structured work. Whereas, like, say, a Monday and a Wednesday, I'm going to teach jujitsu at noon. So that gives me structure. So I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to do a bit of work, I'm going to do my cold plunge, try and spend some time with my son and my wife. And then I'm going to go to the gym. And then but after that, I consider almost a win of a day because I've already done the things that are important to me. I'm probably going to do some more work. Hopefully, I'm going to have some time in the afternoon to be undistracted with my son, leave my phone in the other room, try and be present. And then when I'm traveling, I'm going to be, maybe I'll have to make some work calls, but maybe I'm going to listen to an audiobook that's going to really inspire me. So I'm just trying to fill in my day with the things that I want to do in that day, if that makes sense. But routine is a lot of real high achievers. They have every 50 minutes of their day is time blocked, and I don't want to live like that. So I think
Yeah.
it's a blend between having structure. I think you have to have some structure in your week, and I really believe that humans need structure. I think a lot of people that say you're out of work and you don't really have anything to do in a week, and you can just maybe you can try and spend some time online, try and make some calls, talk to a job recruiter, but maybe you can also spend 8 hours just on the sofa getting takeout and watching Netflix. That's not happiness. I really think that humans do need structure. So if we don't have structure, a lot of entrepreneurs don't have structure. And I work in real estate. Real estate is it's a very fluid job. You might have a slow couple of days, and then you might have a crazy few days, and you don't necessarily have a weekly structure. So I think it's very important. You have to create some structure for your sanity. And then depending on your priorities, my biggest challenge is I like to work and I like to be productive. And real estate, the business it's hot and cold. So when it's hot, I'm trying to maximize that. And my biggest challenge is pulling back and forcing myself to be away and unconnected so I can spend time with my family. Because my son is 3, and I'm already thinking, man, when he's 14, 15, he's not going to be going to hang out with his parents. He's going to want to spend time with his friends. So I have probably 10 years to really have an impression. And some of my friends with older kids say, Lawrence, I would say it's even less. It's more like 7 years. So I have the best thing about fatherhood is when I was younger, I was a late dad, so I became a father at 41. When I was 36, 37, 38, the years kind of bled into one another, and I didn't really give it too much thought. But when you see a little guy where every week you're like, man, he's developing, I'm never going to get that week back when he was babbling. Now he's talking. I'm never going to get the week back where he was just kind of crawling around. Now suddenly he's running around. So like you realize the importance. He's made me appreciate the importance of time so much, and that's like forced me back in the present. So that's been the biggest
Mm.
unexpected blessing of fatherhood.
Well, and I love that. And what you shared is it's a fine line. I think of it as a fine dance of doing and being. Even
Mm,
for me, just like you, like I have structure and specific things on specific days. But if I'm too structured in doing, then I am not connected to intuition, mind body experience. Like I'm disconnected, and that doesn't
yes.
feel good. So it's like figuring out what works for you.
And also, Heather, I don't know if your thoughts on meditation, but I was never a big meditator. I was always, I would consider a long run like meditation. It's kind of just me and my thoughts running. But I've recently realized that depending on people's input. So if you're in a job where you're getting a lot of things coming at you, which I'm currently in, I think it's so healthy. It's just take 10 minutes, and it doesn't even have to be meditating. It doesn't have to be anything other than just being not bombarded with inputs and letting your brain kind of digest and sort things
Yeah.
out. And I'm amazed. I've been doing it more and more where I'm just taking these 5, 10 minutes here and there, work on some breath work, and all these things come to me. So because it's very difficult. A lot of people that are busy can go through the whole day where they're just reacting, 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 and things are coming and they're doing this and that's not a way I want to live my life. So you have to balance the productive thing where you're reacting to things and you're doing things that have to get done with also the more reflective things where you're just kind of figuring out And also you almost like you're giving your brain a rest, because I always prided myself on being able to juggle all these things in my head at the same time. But it's mentally very exhausting, and it's not really the way that I want to live my life. So I
Yeah.
love what you said about balancing those two things.
That is for me a daily non-negotiable is somehow disconnecting, creating presence. I tend to do meditations in the morning, but just like you shared, running is my moving meditation. When I'm not listening to something and I'm present, I get epiphanies and aha and business downloads and ideas because of presence. So even with your cold plunge, you're creating presence. Here's
Yes.
something I want to ask you. I think I found it on your website, but can you explain to me what is the idea that you've created with Lion Heart, living our
Oh,
best life?
that was my fighting nickname. Was after one of my fights, it was a long fight, and in the first 5 seconds, the seam of the glove kind of nicked the bridge of my nose, and I started bleeding. So it was this long, bloody back and forth fight. And after, my coach is like, Lawrence, you really are the Lionheart. And then that's so it's a play on my fighting nickname. But the reason I love the idea of Lionheart, the idea of having a big heart, is a lot of the time we can't control our physical gifts, but we can control our heart in the sense of how tenacious we're going to be, how aggressive we're going to be towards trying to forge the life that we want. So I really love the idea of, I think they say there's a phrase, it's not the size of the dog, it's the size of the fight, the dog in the fight. Or it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And it's like having it comes back to mindset, but it's about controlling the things that we can control. We can't control, if I'm 5'5", I can't be 6'5", but I can have a strength of will that is more than anyone else out there. I heard someone say, um, I, you have the talent, but so many people have more talent than me, but I'll never be outworked. And I think that we can all control how hard we work. I know David Goggins says most people only know 40% of their limitations. Um,
Cookie
humans
jar.
are. Yes, yeah, exactly. And humans are wired, Heather, to we're it's all about self-preservation from a physiological, biological place. So our body's gonna shut off way before our limits, because otherwise we would injure ourselves. So I think it's something that we can work on, is expanding those limits. And it kind of comes back to I'm talking about the physical limits, but it's the same with the mental limits. That's something that I'm and I want to stress this, Heather, to I definitely haven't figured this out. I am a constant work in progress. And even just yesterday, I had a work call with a friend of mine, and we were talking about ideas. He was a very successful financier, and he worked for a company for 10 years, and they just laid him off, and he's trying to figure out the next step. And I was trying to give him some ideas, and we had a conversation, and my ideas and my thoughts grew just then on the phone. I thought, man, maybe I am thinking too small in my business and my goals and my dreams. So this is something, it's the physical capacity. Normally we're at 40% or whatever it is. We're at a fraction of our potential, but it's mentally too. It's how big do you want to dream? And that's why, I absolutely love Elon Musk, because he just keeps doing things that people say impossible. I just finished his biography, and it's just so interesting. Like he would try and figure out the cost of his rocket ships, and he would go to these companies, and they would say, it's going to be 800,000 for this part of the rocket. And then he was like, well, why? And then he goes back to first principles, and he talks to his engineers, and then he can somehow get the same part for 15,000, but he makes it in house. And he does that with every aspect of his business, where he just breaks it down. He goes to first principles, and he says, but why are they saying it's this much? Why? Like, and it's because a company that he's competing against, one of the SpaceX rivals for these contracts for the US government, is Boeing. And Boeing is this monolithic company that's bogged down by bureaucracy, and the costs that they have are something like 15 times higher than he can do at SpaceX, because SpaceX is small, it's nimble, it's always trying to reevaluate things. So I love the idea that Elon Musk he's a prime example, and Steve Jobs is another one, where he just said, well, why can't we do this? Everyone's telling me I can't do it, but why? And I think
Yeah.
we can go through life like that. I can't help. I'm thinking about what you mentioned about that one client who was in his 50s, and my heart goes out to him, because I think that there's this lie to society where it's like if you do the things you're supposed to do, and you kind of mentioned this about your own story too, if you do the things you're supposed to do, you'll be happy. And so many people, they're good people, they work hard, they do the things they're supposed to do, they put their head down, and then years go by and they realize that they're really unfulfilled. And there's
Mhm.
that wonderful quote, um, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And I think about that all the time because I want to raise my son to be healthy in the real sense of the word, not to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I think there's so much power in that. And I've been thinking about it a lot.
Preach. I love that. Here's what I want to ask you because we touched on a lot. I nerd out on this. I love these conversations. But I want to ask you, what do you believe is a key takeaway you want listeners to get?
Let's talk about mindset because I know that's one of the things you're very passionate about. Carol Dweck wrote a great book, and she talked about the idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And that's something that you have to, I feel like humans in general, we have to constantly re-examine why we think certain ways and are we limiting our own thoughts. And I'm not where I want to be in life. I have a lot of goals and I have a lot of failures and a lot of ups and downs. But the one thing that I'm really proud of that I live my life is I've always had a growth mindset. And I've always pushed myself to achieve things that my younger self would have never thought is possible. And anyone can do that. It doesn't matter where you are in life. We can all have a growth mindset that if we put the work in and we invest in the things that we choose are important, we can get to a place that our younger self would have never thought was possible. And that's just such a beautiful feeling. So it's it's kind of back to what you said about life is when you realize that life is chaotic and we're never going to arrive there. As long as we have the confidence that we're going to keep trying our best to get to where we want to be, and we're going to keep investing in ourselves and working on the things that we want to work on, things that we choose are important, we will get to a place that we can never imagine. So that just having those realistic, not silly, but having realistic big dreams that scare you and having the mindset that yeah, maybe today you won't figure it out, and maybe by the summer of 2024 you won't figure it out, but maybe by 2028 or 2030 you'll figure it out. It might take you a bit of time, but try to stretch your dreams because don't think about what society's telling you to do.
Mm.
Think about what you want to do and how you can think a bit bigger because the opportunities today, especially with technology and just the economy, and there's so many opportunities. Like you hear about these entrepreneurs that make an absolute fortune with the most random niche idea, but it was maybe, I heard someone selling, I think it was golf club head cleaner on Amazon. He was a golfer, the most random idea, and he was killing it on Amazon. He ended up selling out. So like I love the idea of trying to find niches that you're passionate about. Maybe you have a bit more knowledge than most people because it's something you're very passionate about, this niche, and then figuring out how you can make something of that. And think big because what's the point of thinking small? Even if you fail with huge dreams, at least you're trying. But if you never even try, then you're never going to get anywhere. So I love the idea of being anti-fragile and putting yourself out there. And I love that I'm not really a basketball guy, but Michael Jordan is he's such a hero in the Chicagoland area. And he's famous for saying, he's the best because he's missed the most shots. He's missed 10,000 shots in his career. Why did he miss so many? Because he took more than anybody, because he kept putting himself on the line. And I just love that. If you look at World Cup soccer, a lot of time the game will come down to penalties. Can you imagine representing your country in the World Cup and the pressure of a penalty? If you miss the penalty, the country's going to hate you. If you score the penalty, you're going to be a national hero. The amount of pressure, and you'll see these are the top professionals, the top 13 of the country. And you'll see when they're choosing, you'll see some of the guys just shake their head. They don't want anything to do with that. And these are the elite of the elite in their field. So put yourself out there. I just think I've had so many failures in life, but I'm so proud because I
Yeah.
put myself out there.
I love that because even, I consider, this is my belief, the American dream is a boring ass box. Like that's just an old school mentality. And there's so many more infinite potentials that we can step into when you get out of that comfort zone.
Exactly. I love that.
Here's what I want to ask you to wrap up the interview. I have a few rapid fire questions for you. The first one being, what is a quote or motto that you live by?
That's a good one. Well, I'm going to give you kind of a weird answer. There's a therapist, Martin Seligman, and he wrote a book in the early 2000s, and he kind of launched this new field of positive psychology. And in it, he talks about success being a mixture of trying to find these what he calls signature strengths, things that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and then trying to build a life where you're doing as many of them, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your hobbies. And when I took the test the first time when I was in my early 20s, this wasn't even on there. But I retook the test a few months ago, and the number one signature strength was love, which I was completely bewildered by. It's like, love, what does that mean? Am I a hippie? But I think just so the philosophy now is um, I want to live my life with love, and I want to. There's people that say every time you come to a decision, there's you're gonna make the decision based on love or by fear, and I want to make every decision from a position of love, and
Mhm.
so I guess that would be my unexpected realization the last few months.
That's amazing. I love that. What is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
I'll give you two because I'm an overachiever. The first is I've just reread it the third time, and it's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And I recommended it to a few friends, and they've absolutely loved it too. And the reason I love it is because it's not a traditional book on, hey, work hard and make money. It's about the philosophy of money, and it's about how we think about wealth and about how like what we were talking about earlier, we keep coming back to the theme of people that have lived their life with a certain career that they end up not feeling too fulfilled. And so it's the idea. He talks a lot about the trade-offs of money, how we think about money, how we best grow wealth. And it's a really philosophical book, and I absolutely love the philosophy of money because I think it's so important having the right mindset about money and wealth. So that's a great book. A new book that just came out is called Arate by Brian Johnson, and it's nearly 1,000 pages, but it's incredibly readable, very short pages, and it's 451 lessons of wisdom, distilled wisdom. And he's an incredible. I mean, he's read pretty much every book that I've ever read, loved, heard of. He talks a lot about Stoic philosophy and also modern science of modern happiness. Things like Martin Seligman's authentic happiness. He talks about that, but it's these short chapters, and you can read one every morning, one every afternoon, or one every evening, and it's just distilled wisdom that's going to improve your life. And I absolutely loved it. It was really, really wonderful. It just came out about a month ago.
Well, and that seems powerful for those who have low attention spans.
Exactly. Yeah. In this day and age, you don't have to read it. The Elon Musk biography was kind of a hard read, 700 pages of deep work. It's so digestible. It's so easy. And I think,
Mm.
you don't have to, you can literally spend, 60 to 120 seconds to read one of these, and it'll give you something to think about that will really improve your life.
Final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
That's easy. It's I think about this so much, Heather, and because I think, oh, if I had the knowledge that I had today in my 20-year-old self, I would take over the world. Oh my goodness, I wish I could have done so many things differently. But then I keep coming back to how much I love my wife and son. And if I'd done anything different when I was young, I wouldn't be the person I am, and I probably wouldn't have met her. So I'm so grateful that I made all my mistakes. But so I wouldn't tell my younger self not to do any of the things that ended up being huge mistakes and costly lessons. But what I would say is kind of what we touched on before, is really enjoy the process. I would say you're going to get more than you ever could have hoped for in life. So please don't wait until you get it to be really happy. Just enjoy every day.
Such a great note to end on. Lawrence, I loved this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Heather, it was such a pleasure, and I'll have to have you on my podcast too because you're such a kindred spirit, and we could go on talking all afternoon.
Yes.